Have you ever imagined facing a warrior nearly 3 meters tall, covered in armor from head to toe? What if I told you that there were not one, but two such giants in the Bible, so fearsome that they made entire armies tremble with fear? Prepare yourself for an epic journey through the sacred pages, where we will discover how God used the unlikely to defeat the seemingly invincible. Our journey begins in the desert, where the Israelites, newly freed from slavery in Egypt, faced their first giant Og, the king of Bashan. Imagine the scene. A people who had spent generations in captivity now facing a king whose bed was more than 4 meters long. The Bible gives us fascinating details about Og in Deuteronomy 3:11. For only Og, king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. This verse gives us an idea of Og's impressive size and shows how his fame spread to the point that his bed was preserved as a relic. Og was not only large in stature, but also in power. He ruled over 60 fortified cities, each protected by high walls, gates, and bars, Deuteronomy 3:5. Imagine the terror that must have gripped the Israelites as they faced such an adversary. How could a people with no military experience hope to defeat a giant who commanded such a vast and fortified kingdom? But here lies the first powerful lesson we can draw. The size of our challenge does not matter when God is on our side. The Lord said to Moses in Numbers 21:34, "Do not fear him, for I have delivered him into your hand, with all his people and his land." This promise must have sounded almost unbelievable to the Israelites, but God was about to demonstrate that his word is always fulfilled. It's interesting to note that this was not the first time God had given such a guarantee to his people. Before the battle against Og, the Israelites had already faced and defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, with a similar promise from God. This previous experience should have strengthened their faith, but facing a giant like Og was still a formidable test. The repetition of God's promise at this critical moment reminds us that he is patient with our doubts and fears, always ready to reassure us of his presence. The ensuing battle was nothing short of spectacular. Despite Og's strength and defenses, the Israelites, led by Moses and fortified by God's promise, achieved an overwhelming victory. Deuteronomy 3:3-7 provides a vivid description of the outcome. "So the Lord our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, and we smote him until none was left to him remaining. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we took from them, 60 cities, and the entire region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan." This detailed description serves not only as a historical record, but as a testimony to the complete victory that God granted his people. The mention of the 60 fortified cities emphasizes the magnitude of the triumph, showing that no human defense, no matter how impressive, can withstand the power of God when he acts on behalf of his people. This victory was a military triumph and a living testimony to God's power and faithfulness to his promises. Imagine the impact this had on the faith and courage of the Israelites. A people who, not long before, had feared returning to Egypt in the face of difficulties, had now defeated one of the most formidable kings of the region. The conquest of Bashan became a landmark in the history of Israel, often recalled in the Psalms and other passages as an example of God's liberating power. For instance, Psalm 135, 10-12 declares, "Who smote great nations and slew mighty kings, Sihon king of the Amorites, and Og king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan, and gave their land for a heritage unto Israel his people." This memory served as a beacon of hope and confidence for future generations, reminding them that no obstacle is insurmountable with God. The victory over Og removed an immediate threat and paved the way for the conquest of the Promised Land. Bashan was a fertile and strategically important region east of the Jordan River. Its conquest gave the Israelites a solid base for future campaigns west of the Jordan. Moreover, the defeat of such a powerful and feared king as Og must have sent shockwaves through Canaan, sowing fear in other people's hearts, the Israelites. We see evidence of this in Joshua 2:10, where Rahab, the prostitute of Jericho, tells the Israelite spies, "For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did unto the two kings of the Amorites, that were on the other side, Jordan, Sihon, and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed." This passage shows how the fame of Israel's victories, including the defeat of Og, spread, fulfilling God's promise to put the fear of Israel upon the peoples, Deuteronomy 2:25. But the story doesn't end here. Centuries later, the Israelites faced another giant, perhaps even more intimidating than Og. His name was Goliath, and he would emerge as the champion of the Philistines, the arch-enemies of Israel during the time of King Saul. The setting of this new battle could not be more different. Instead of the desert and the fortified cities of Bashan, we now have the Valley of Elah, a fertile area in the mountainous region of Judah. The political and military context had also changed dramatically. It was no longer a nomadic people out of Egypt, but an established nation with its king. However, despite all these changes, they still faced the challenge of trusting God in the face of a seemingly invincible enemy. Goliath was a spectacle to behold. The Bible gives us a detailed description in 1 Samuel 17:4-7. "And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. His head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him." Let's pause for a moment to consider these measurements. 6 cubits and a span of approximately 2.90 meters. The coat he wore weighed about 57 kilograms, more than many adults. His spear was described as a weaver's beam, with an iron tip weighing about 7 kilograms. Goliath was not just a giant, he was a walking fortress. For 40 days, Goliath challenged the armies of Israel, mocking them and their God. 1 Samuel 17:8-10 records his words of scorn. "And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him, and kill him, then shall ye be our servants, and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man, that we may fight together." Imagine the devastating effect this had on the morale of the Israelite troops. Every morning and evening for more than a month, they were reminded of their apparent inferiority before this Philistine colossus. Fear spread like a plague through the camp. The situation was so serious that 1 Samuel 17:11 tells us, "When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid." In this scenario of despair, an unlikely hero steps into the scene: David, a young shepherd. David's introduction to the narrative is casual. He was not on the battlefield, but at home, tending his father's sheep. It was only when his father sent him to deliver supplies to his brothers in the army that David encountered the situation. 1 Samuel 17:20-22 tells us, "And David rose early in the morning, and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went, as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench, as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle." Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army, and David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, ran into the army, and came and saluted his brothers. This scene emphasizes the contrast between David and the experienced soldiers. While they were gearing up for battle with war cries, David arrived as a messenger, oblivious to the terror dominating the camp. When all the experienced warriors trembled in fear, this young man, driven by unwavering faith, offered to face Goliath. David's initial reaction to Goliath's challenge, recorded in 1 Samuel 17:26, captures his words, "And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Notice how David's perspective is radically different from that of the soldiers. Where they saw an invincible giant, David saw only an uncircumcised Philistine who dared to defy the living God. This difference in perspective is crucial for understanding David's courage. His confidence was not in his strength or ability, but in the faithfulness and power of God. David's offer to fight Goliath was initially met with skepticism and even ridicule. His brother Eliab accused him of arrogance and irresponsibility, 1 Samuel 17:28. King Saul, when he finally agreed to let David fight, tried to dress him in his armor, a gesture that, although well-intentioned, demonstrated a lack of understanding of David's true source of strength. David's refusal to wear the armor, 1 Samuel 17:39, was not just a matter of physical comfort, but a statement of faith. He was trusting not in human protection, but in divine protection. David's words to Saul in 1 Samuel 17:37 summarize his confidence. David said, moreover, "The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion, and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." Saul's response to David, "Go, and the Lord be with thee," underscores the transition of trust from human means to divine intervention. The confrontation between David and Goliath is one of biblical history's most dramatic and inspiring moments. David's words as he approached Goliath resonate through the ages. "Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." 1 Samuel 17:45-46. This declaration is a display of courage and a profession of faith. David understood that this battle was not just between him and Goliath, but an opportunity for God to demonstrate his power to all nations. What followed was one of the most unexpected and decisive moments in Israel's history. Armed only with a sling and 5 smooth stones, David faced the giant. 1 Samuel 17:49-50 describes the outcome. "And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, smote the Philistine, and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David." This moment not only decided the battle, but also dramatically demonstrated that true strength does not reside in physical size or weaponry, but in faith and reliance on God. Goliath's fall with a single well-aimed stone was not just a stroke of luck, but a tangible manifestation of God's power, acting through a faithful servant. David's victory over Goliath was a personal triumph and a decisive turning point in Israel's history. It marked the beginning of David's rise as a leader and future king, and served as a powerful testimony to God's ability to accomplish the impossible through those who trust in him. The immediate impact of this victory is described in 1 Samuel 17:51-53. Therefore David ran, stood upon the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah arose, shouted, and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley and the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell by the way to Sharem, even unto Gath, and unto Ekron. Goliath's defeat removed the immediate threat, and inspired the entire army of Israel to pursue and defeat the Philistines, turning what could have been a humiliating defeat into an overwhelming victory. These two stories, separated by centuries, share profound themes that resonate today. Both show us that the giants in our lives, challenges, fears, or adversaries, may seem insurmountable at first glance. But when we trust in God and act with faith, we discover that no obstacle is too great. Israel's victory over Og and David's over Goliath was not the result of military superiority or brilliant strategy, but of unshakable trust in the power and faithfulness of God. This reminds us that in our battles, the key to victory is not our strength or resources, but our willingness to trust and obey God, even when circumstances seem impossible. Og and Goliath represent more than just physical enemies. They symbolize all that intimidates us, makes us doubt, and causes fear. These may be health issues, financial difficulties, troubled relationships, or internal battles. The principle, however, remains the same. With God, we can face and overcome even the most daunting challenges. Just as the Israelites had to engage in battle against Og, and David had to take the step of faith to face Goliath, we are called to act in faith in the face of our giants. God's promise in Isaiah 41:10 echoes through these stories and reaches us today. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. The lesson of Moses leading the Israelites against Og teaches us the importance of faith-based leadership, even in the face of an invincible enemy. Moses trusted God's promise and inspired the people to do the same. This reminds us that as leaders in our spheres of influence, our trust in God can inspire others to face their giants. Moses' leadership at this critical moment was not based on his strength or wisdom, but on his willingness to trust and obey God. In the same way, we are called to lead not by dominion or force, but by faith and example, trusting that God can do the impossible through us. On the other hand, the story of David and Goliath shows us that God often chooses the unlikely to accomplish his purposes. David was not a trained warrior, but a young shepherd, yet his faith and courage transformed him into the hero Israel needed at that moment. This encourages us not to underestimate our potential when aligned with God's purposes. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 1:27-29, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." This truth reminds us that God can use any of us, regardless of our apparent limitations, to accomplish his purposes and bring glory to his name. Both stories also highlight the importance of relying on God's resources, not our own. The Israelites stood no chance against Og by relying solely on their forces, just as David could not defeat Goliath with conventional weapons. It was trust in God's power that made the difference. This challenges us to reconsider how we approach our challenges. Are we relying on our abilities or God's infinite strength? The Apostle Paul captured this truth in 2 Corinthians 12:9-10 when he wrote, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.' Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Finally, these narratives teach us about the nature of true courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Moses and David surely felt fear in the face of their respective giants, but they chose to act based on their faith, not their fears. This encourages us to face our fears, knowing God is with us. As Joshua 1:9 reminds us, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." These stories inspire us to cultivate courage based not on our strength, but on the assurance of God's presence and power in our lives. They call us to take steps of faith, trusting that just as God was with Moses and David, He is also with us, ready to empower us to face any challenge we encounter along our path. We have reached the end of our video, and I hope you like it. If you're looking for inspiration, knowledge, and spiritual connection, don't let this opportunity pass you by. Subscribe to our channel now, leave your like and comment to strengthen our community. And if you want to help us continue sharing religious stories that touch hearts, become a channel member. Together we can make a difference and strengthen our spiritual journey. We're counting on you. We've left the link in the description of this video so you can become a member today. Continue watching videos about the history of the Bible. I will leave 2 recommendations here on the screen. God bless you. We will get to the next video.